Hi, Academy of Our Lady students. This is Terry and Michael, and they are working on a project here. I'll let them tell you about it.
We are making 3 rose windows from 3 very famous cathedrals in France: Notre Dame de Paris, Orléans, and Chartres. Those are 3 cathedrals in France. The significance of these rose windows is they represent churches in France. After Joan of Arc was declared to be innocent by Pope Calixtus, all the churches in France, the bells rang. In addition, when testimony was being taken in the retrial of Joan, the rehearing began at the Notre Dame de Paris and traveled throughout France. And so to collect testimony on behalf of Joan. And so these cathedrals that we've chosen also represent the regions of France where testimony was taken. So they will be put on poles. We made them from vinyl that we blew up, and we're fitting them over hula hoops. We're going to mount them on poles, and each of the rose windows is going to be carried by an angel, a person dressed as an angel. So that's what we're doing.
And you want to tell them that you went to their school, sort of?
Yes, I went to Archbishop Blank, which no longer exists, but it was absorbed into Academy of Our Lady, as was Immaculata. Go Doves. So my alma mater there. Hold up too.
Okay, so this is Notre Dame de Paris, the famous rose window, and this one is Orléans. And these are pretty much done.
Yes.
These two, we still have to figure out the mount. And the one that they're working on right now is Chartres. One of the things that's cool about this trial, this second trial, is that, after she was convicted in this horrible corrupt trial, and then she was burned at the stake and put to death at the age of 19, which was a tragedy. Then 25 years later, in the fastest the Catholic Church has ever changed its mind, 25 years later, they had a retrial, and the retrial was really a very unusual historical event. I mean, it was unusual that the Catholic Church would change its mind at all, and then it was even more unusual that they really went to a lot of trouble about it. And so they spent about a full year collecting evidence, and they gathered testimony, and they actually went all over France to gather the testimony to different regions of France where Joan had been, and they invited all these people who had been associated with Joan in her life to give character testimony. Yeah, from all walks of life. Nobility, so that was unusual about it too, that they did not just ask nobility to speak, they also asked the knights, the people who fought with her. And so we have this amazing, we know more about Joan and her life than we know about King Charles and his life in that age, because of this. Yeah, the testimony, these descriptions of this is what she was like and this is what her life was like. So that those descriptions from all these different witnesses of all different walks of life that she had touched in different ways, it's really a very unusual historical record.
To her holiness and her goodness and her bravery and yes.
Yeah, and to how influential she really was. So some of the soldiers really talked about how influential she had been in shaping the military strategy. So that's one of the reasons we know that she wasn't just a figurehead on a horse. She was actually commanding the army, and they have the testimony of her comrades in arms to say that. And so these windows are each representing the cathedral from the regions where they gathered that testimony. The trial itself took place mostly in the Notre Dame de Paris.
Started there. It was there for 6 weeks before the persons assigned by the Pope to collect the evidence started traveling around France, because many, in those days travel was difficult. It was easier to go to the people than for them to come to Paris. And then after all the testimony was collected, it actually ended in Rouen, France, is where it was read, the final declaration of her innocence.
Which is where she was killed.
Yes, so it kind of came full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Pat, you've made some interesting throws.
Well, I have bought plain wooden doubloons before. These are our crude doubloons, which are wooden doubloons with patterns on them. But I have bought plain wooden doubloons and painted them black and taken different images off the internet of Joan of Arc in stained glass. And Amanda on the computer has helped me reduce them to a size that will fit, and then I cut them in a circle, which I can do. I just have to cut circles, and glue them on the black background, so it looks kind of like stained glass. And on the back, I hand write who Joan of Arc in the year of the parade. Cool. And I always like to tell people when I'm handing out a throw, if there's time, if we're paused in the parade, I like to tell them a little bit about Joan's life, because so many people don't realize she was a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, really?
Oh, absolutely. All kinds of people have no idea that there was an actual person.
What do
named
they
Joan of
think
Arc.
she was? A fictional character? Out of a... I'm
Well,
just
they
curious.
just don't
Robin
know.
Hood.
Well,
Yeah, like Robin
they
Hood.
think he was sort of a mythical character.
Oh, more like King Arthur, or
Yeah.
maybe
or,
something who's a melange of
Or like a saint. I mean, a lot of people have this misty, in the mists of time, they don't think,
even though the
history was-
historical record is...
well, there's a good historical
Abundant.
record, but
Yeah.
But I grew up
It's
in
it's
Texas,
better
we
on
didn't
Joan
learn
than it
about
is on
Joan of Arc.
most.
Why would we?
Most
well,
people in the Middle
I was a
Ages.
French teacher, and I'm named after her, and I did not learn the story until a few years ago.
So everybody's different.
It's,
No, it is interesting, since she's historical.
I chose her for my confirmation name.
Really?
Yeah, I knew about her.
So what motivates you all to do this every year?
You.
I think it's a wonderful way of meeting very nice people and being part of something that has different significance for different participants. It's a real melange of people who are francophiles, serious medievalists, devout Catholics, followers of Joan, or some people are just creative artists who express themselves in street art. And I think it's a fascinating thing to be a part of.
Anybody
I
else?
think what's really amazing, it's amazing to be part of a parade. That is really a thrill. You're all dressed up, the crowd's all there, there's music, it's really magical. And you see the people's faces around you that are literally, people's faces are just shining, really, with, kind of happiness. Well, they come out when it's freezing.
Mardi Gras.
I mean,
The last time that said, oh, I have to have a candle. I've got a candle going back for every year of the parade.
Wow. Well, that was one of the questions the girls had is what are the parade goers? What is the crowd like?
It's a family crowd, and they're excited, and they're dressed up oftentimes. And
It's at night when the sun, when it's dark and the candles that everyone's holding is beautiful. That makes everyone look kind of romantic and happy.
It's a mix of local people and tourists, sometimes from other countries, young and old. devout and zany college kids. It's just that
Nope.
there have
It's,
been nuns who have come to this parade because there's a convent on the parade route. And I have had nuns ask for a throw.
There's a lot of francophile. I mean, there's French speakers. You know, they're really touched when the people from France who stand there in New Orleans and see this parade that is dedicated to the patron saint of France. They're moved by the whole thing. They're kind of like, wow, you know, it's really something.
I've seen people tear up.
Yeah, they.
Hi, ladies. This is Kate. She's a flaming heretic. I'm going to let her tell you what she's working on here.
I'm working on letters, really beautiful blue fabric, like a really super royal blue, that is going to be, it's spelling called, and it's going to go on banners. So this is my second banner project. Last year I painted banners, and it's really nice. And I love working with the fabric and listening to the Joan of Arc music. That's one of the reasons I love to come. And I like chatting with the people when I'm in the other room, because it's solitary. And I love being a flaming heretic. I was so excited when I joined the crew. I thought it was full and I wouldn't be able to do it. And I happened to be here working, and that day they announced that, lo and behold, they had openings. So I really enjoyed that a lot.
So tell them about your costume. What do you wear in the Flaming Heretic section?
Well, all of the flaming heretics pretty much have these fabulous, they're called wings or whatever, but literally they're like belly dancers, gorgeous, hot red, gleaming cape that you can move around and everything and dance with. And then I wear a red dress, a red velvet dress. We need to be warm and also suit the character. We need to be able to adjust your warmth level. So I have that on, and then I have a bustier that's thin. Then I also have a black suede bustier, and that provides a lot of warmth. And then I have a red wig, a long red wig, and that provides warmth as well as character. And then this, let's see, those are most of what I have. And then the boots I have on now I wear, long, nice, comfortable boots. And it's great though. And one of the things I love about this parade is I also ride an iris, and they're like polar opposites. And one of the things that's amazing with this is when you walk through the streets in the French Quarter, the people aren't looking for throws. It's like Iris is all about the throws. Where are you going to throw me off of the float? And here, the first year, I've walked twice now. When I went to give them the throw, it was like they didn't know what to do with it. They were like busy taking photographs of us and really into the parade, and they weren't into the throws at all the first year. Last year they were a little bit more. But the throws are wonderful because they're all like, even if they're made out of some products that come from China, we put them together in a different way. So they're hand manufactured and then also handmade things and stuff. Yeah.
You asked about our throws, so I thought I would show you our throws display board that we have up most of the year so that members can see what we've got. Members are helping make a lot of these. So here we go. We have matches, which is kind of irreverent, but there we are, because our heroine was burned at the stake. So you see those are Flaming Heretic matchbooks. And then over here we got our saint medallions. So each year we do a different image. So we have inside the saint medallion package is a card that explains what the image was this year. And then the back side of it is signed by the person who made it and the person who did the prayers for the recipient. And that image on the front is the prayer card. So each year we also have a prayer card, and that has all the art is medieval images, and I do all the graphic arts. So those are all based on real medieval Book of Hours. These are from the Book of Hours of Charles VIII, who is the grandson of our king. And on the back of the prayer card, each year we have a different prayer that is written by a different crew member. Let's see, we also got some doubloons here. We have an assortment of wooden doubloons, and we have that special shield-shaped metal doubloon. We got some butterfly garden seeds, and they are red poppy seeds, which grow all over France, grow wild all over France, particularly in the area that Joan was from. And on top of that, they're associated with being in memory of soldiers. So a lot of times for Memorial Days, they will pin a poppy on, on your lapel or something. So we picked poppies for our butterfly garden. And the reason we did the butterfly garden is because there's a legend that the butterflies followed Joan's banner. So even her enemies have written about that. This is one of our most labor-intensive handmade throws. So this year is a little doll. It's medieval poppet style without the face. That was typical of a medieval doll. And this one is dressed in the traditional dress of Joan's village, which is the town of Domremy. So you can see here, she's got a playing card stuck in there with her that shows the traditional dress of Domremy, and she's got a sheep with her because when Joan was a little girl, she did like most farm girls did, and she looked after the animals. And you can see here is our Joan doll magnets. So last year, or a couple years ago, for our 10th anniversary, we completed a series of Joan dolls. So we have all these Joans represented somewhere in our parade. So we've got Joan the soldier, Joan the shepherdess, Joan the heretic at the stake, the golden Joanie on the pony representing the statue. We have this warrior spirit, the spirit of warrior Joan, which is a ghost Joan that is in our restoration battalion for her retrial. And then we have the Saint Joan here looking like an angel. So we completed that series of dolls, and now we've started over. So you see here the Domremy, the shepherdess doll. And then up here we have last year's doll, which was the Joan the warrior. War horse here made out of recycled wine corks. So we try to use some recycled stuff. And then below that you see here the felt horse, and this is blank with the idea that members who buy that then decorate the horse so that it, so each one is unique on top of being handmade to start with. And the stuffing for this horse is also recycled materials. Let's see what else we got. Over here we have our playing cards. So those playing cards are, a lot of crews do some kind of collector card, but I think ours are especially cool because in real life, the first playing cards that had faces on them developed right in the court of Charles VII, which is our Charles, the Charles that Joan was fighting to get back on the throne. And so our playing cards were earlier than that, but they didn't have faces. And the printing press was just taking off about this time, and so you started to see the development of these playing cards with faces. And the very first decks of playing cards that had faces were developed in France at the court of Charles VII, and all the characters were real people from the court of Charles VII, including Joan herself as the Queen of Spades. And in the French deck, they have names for playing cards. And some of the characters in the French deck today are still named after characters from King Charles' court. The most famous is one you don't see on the board here because it's going to be a new card for us for this year, is Layirda, who was one of the famous soldiers who fought with Joan. He's a really ferocious warrior, so he was already a legend before he ever fought with Joan, and then he only got more legendary from there. And even today, he is a character in video games, a warrior character, and he is immortalized on the French playing card as the Jack of Hearts. So we're very pleased to be adding that character to our deck this year. And they don't know why he was called Layirda for sure, but his enemies called him the Wrath of God, which is what, Ira Deus. And then the French also had a nickname for him, which also sounds kind of like Irda, which was a nickname. They called him Hedgehog because he was so feisty. And he's the character that you see in all the Joan movies. Up here we have our 12th night scroll. So this is a scroll announcing that we are welcoming in 12th night in honor of the birthday of Joan of Arc, the 100th anniversary of her canonization this year, the adoration of the Magi, conclusion of the 12 days of Christmas, and the crowning of kings fit or unfit to rule. So this is kind of a whimsical thing. Again, you see our medieval art. So these come straight out of real medieval artworks, except that we have modified them to put in our stuff. So this is a picture of our real cake, and this is, of course, our logo put into the original medieval artwork. And that actually, you don't see it here, but that's actually rolled up with a little crown ring when it's presented to people in the parade. And then over here, we got a book, which is original to us. Book, Birthday Parade from Joan of Arc. My mom actually wrote this book. My mom happens to be an early childhood expert. So she wrote the text and I did the graphics so that it uses graphics from our parade and it presents them with this medieval border in medieval style. So you see classic medieval design. You have a kind of separate storyline going along here in the margins of the design. So here you see us getting ready for the parade, and then the middle pages tells the story of Joan's life, while the bottom of it shows our whole parade. And then when you get to the end of the story, you see the whole parade in a medieval artwork. Hi, I'm one of the crew captains, Amanda Helm, and I play St. Michael in the parade. And I thought that we didn't all answer all of your questions, so I thought I'd run down the list and answer all the questions we missed yet. Let's see, how early do we start prepping? Well, we have a debrief soon after the parade each year, where we kind of start already talking about ideas for next year. In some ways, we're almost prepping for next year even before this year happens, because at some point you have to say no more ideas are allowed for this year. And so that's cool, but you're going to have to save it for next year. We get serious after Mardi Gras, so we usually take a little break and do other things for Mardi Gras. A lot of us are in other crews, and so then we get serious probably around March or April. This is going to be our 12th parade. It's a parade of 10 Mass together. We definitely attend one Mass together each year. So the Sunday before the parade, we go together to Mass in the cathedral. A lot of our members are pretty active in their own congregations, so generally everybody is somewhere else on Sunday morning going to their own church. Do the members of crew learn about St. Joan of Arc together? We absolutely do spend time learning about Joan of Arc together. So the crew I put together a virtual library of information about Joan, and that is connected to resources in the Jefferson Parish and the Orleans Parish library system. Plus there's tons of free stuff that people can download or watch online. It has books, music, and movies and television shows all gathered together in one place. So we recommend that to our members, and a lot of our members do check that stuff out. A lot of them already know about Joan and are already excited about Joan before they even start with us. But then in addition to all that, we have a conference every year. So we actually bring in speakers and we co-host with a university. So we did it with Loyola for several years, and for the last couple of years we've been doing it with the Department of Medieval Studies at Tulane University. And so we bring in speakers whose research area, it's kind of a mix of artists, community people, and academics. And so we bring in people whose expertise is Joan. So we've had a speaker in on Joan as from a military strategy point of view. We've had a speaker who wrote one of the big books on the subject, which is The Maid and the Queen, that explains all about the relationship between Joan of Arc and Yolande, who was actually the mother-in-law of Charles VII, but was kind of a political mastermind in the French court at the time and was influential in funding Joan's army and in convincing Charles to give Joan a listen. So we have this conference each year, and it focuses on a mix of Joan's time period, the 100 Years' War, French history, Joan herself, of course, and New Orleans French heritage. Is it a mostly female crew? Well, it does tend to be rather female dominated. You don't have to be a woman to join it, and we have quite a few men and we have quite a few couples, but Joan is especially popular with females. And one thing I will say is that a lot of the characters in medieval times, the exciting characters, tended not to be women. Joan was obviously quite the exception for her time, but we pay no attention to that. So I play St. Michael. We have women playing male roles all over the place. After all, Joan was dressing as a guy and doing what guys do, so we follow her example. Do crew members have to pay for all their own costumes and make their own costumes? Well, we have two types of crew members. So we have foot soldiers, we call them, who are our volunteers, and they do not pay. They carry our banners, manage our props, walk security along the edges of the parade, and we costume our foot soldiers. And that's kind of unusual about our parade. Lots of times, most parades will have these volunteers, but they will call them security, and they will put them in a t-shirt maybe, but we put medieval costumes on them, and I think that really contributes to our parade having a more unified and festive look and makes us look a lot bigger too. Then we have full members, and the full members are the ones who financially provide for the crew, and they also get to choose and provide their own costumes. So yes, they do pay for their costume in addition to paying for their membership in the crew, and they also, for most part, they also give out throws, and they either make their throws themselves or they purchase their throws. So that's an additional expense, but all in all, we're still very cheap compared to a lot of the big float crews. So our membership, depending on what time of year you get it, if you get the early bird membership, an individual membership starts at $125, and there are costumes available. They may not be the most fabulous costumes, but there are costumes available that are ready-made Halloween costumes and stuff like that. So you could probably get by with costume throws and your membership for as cheap as, maybe $300, whereas a lot of crews cost $3,000 and up. Are the crew members dedicated to St. Joan of Arc? Do they ask for her prayers? Well, some definitely do. And I would say all the crew members are pretty dedicated to Joan of Arc, but people have their own ways of being dedicated to a particular saint. So we have some devout Catholics, and they probably do ask for her prayers, and we put the crew prayer on our prayer card each year. And we have others who are not particularly religious, but they look at Joan certainly as a courageous example that they try to emulate in their own lives. And I myself am not Catholic, I'm actually Protestant, and so we have kind of a different view of saints in the Protestant church. So we do believe in saints, but we believe that we don't really have a formal canonization process for our saints, but we do believe in the communion of saints. So certainly I believe that Joan was inspired by God and lived an exemplary life that I can only hope to follow. One of the things that really amazes me about Joan is how she listened so well, and I'm a little bit envious of how clearly she heard God's voice and how clearly she knew what to do. So I play St. Michael, and my battalion is the Voices Battalion, Voices of Joan Battalion is what we call the sections of our parade. And so my section has St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret, which were the three voices that through whom she understood what God's commands were. And part of the reason that I'm in that section is because I've always thought that was the most powerful part of the story, even though I'm a Protestant. So I completely believe that she was divinely inspired and that she really did hear God's voice. And I really admire how certain, how confident, how certain, and how faithful she was to following God's exact guidance. And it kind of makes me wonder what we might all do, what we might all hear if we just knew how to listen, how to carve out time for ourselves. So one of the throws that I have given in the voices section is earplugs. So they have a little note on that. Well, partly it's because I'm always on an earplug crusade to protect your ears while listening to all of our great live music, which I love, but a lot of it's too high volume. So anyway, we gave the earplugs, and they said on there, choose which voices you hear. Because too often we are playing so much music, media, nonstop noise from somewhere, and we can hardly hear our own thoughts, let alone God's thoughts. And I think that covers all your questions. So I hope this has been pretty interesting. I'm counting on somebody else to give you a good history of Joan of Arc. She's a fascinating character, and we know more about Joan than almost anyone in Joan's time. She's a fascinating historical document. And don't forget, you could sign up to be angels and parade with us free. All you got to do is come up with a white outfit. It doesn't even have to be a costume. It doesn't have to be expensive. And we'll provide the wings and halo. So you can sign up on our website, www.joanofarcparade.org.